Hello, I am Ron, and I'm really glad you're here. Today is a really big day for me because I've decided that after a couple of months of easing into this conversation about life, that I now want to deepen into some really important subjects that touch all our lives, whether we've been immersed in these conversations yet or not. I'm going to expand into more understanding about life and how it works, how it operates, how it flows through us, how we can create truly meaningful, powerful, what I mean is empowered lives. Lives that get better and better and better all the time. I've called today's subject, what is sacred spirituality? Now, believe me, this is a very grounded, practical part of all our lives. It is a potential for living lives that are sacred, holding self sacred, our individuality as sacred, no matter where we are in our journey, no matter what age or level of our potential we've reached, to understand from the time we're born that we are sacred individuals on a soul journey is what I'm talking about. And I want this to be very grounded and practical, no matter who you are, men, women, young people. This is the opportunity that we have in our lives. So I'm going to start with the fact that when I was a little kid, I wanted to understand life in every way. I wanted to understand how it works. I wanted to understand myself. I wanted to understand how to have a truly meaningful or fulfilling life. And I felt really frustrated with the limitations of what I was witnessing and being taught. Taught about myself, taught about life around me. I didn't understand so many things. A lot of life seemed unfair, quite honestly. A lot of life seemed out of balance. I didn't understand why certain people were born with these challenges and other people were born with a whole different set of challenges. I didn't understand why some people were born into the opportunity of money and other people were not. Why others were born with an awesome sense of intelligence, while others seem to struggle with this facet of their lives. So many things did not make sense to me, but I am thrilled to tell you that now, after a journey of seeking for deeper answers and deeper solutions and an understanding of life starting with self, so much more makes great sense to me now. I have dedicated my life, as a matter of fact, over the last 25 years with passing on levels of understanding about self and about life. The sacredness of self. Very practical, real ways. From our physical, mental, emotional, sexual, and spiritual selves. As grounded and practical as we need to take it. All of life, all of the potential that we hold inside needs a clear education in order for us to learn how to tap what's in here. Now, I started my life out with a very small comfort zone of what I was being taught. I was being prepared to go to school and learn a bunch of facts and prepare myself to eventually get a job and make some money, hoping that somehow it would be more fulfilling than the generations that had come before me. But I didn't perceive that very many people around me were happy and fulfilled. I didn't see them in profoundly connected, intimate conversations and connections with one another. I didn't even see them feeling so wonderfully about themselves. I saw a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of acting out, a lot of numbing out. And I then in my adult years, when I first started my career performing, I had the chance to witness so many levels and layers of life. I had the chance to work with tons of famous people. I even had the chance to dine with royalty a couple of times. What I have witnessed is that we are all pretty much the same. No matter what our specific challenges are in this lifetime, we all have the same needs, we all have the same challenges, we all have been missing a profound education about self, the sacredness of life, the sacred spirituality of all of life. This is what I want to begin a conversation about. I have had a school of self-mastery in New York City for the last 25 years. What do I mean by self-mastery? Why is that different than how other people might word it? I have had the privilege of so much education about the levels of potential that we all hold. I have had the opportunity to experience deeper and deeper and deeper levels of that potential. I have had the opportunity to even be a part of worldwide events of energetic downloads on the planet that were at very auspicious times when the energies were so high that the experiences were literally miracles compared to what I had been told as a child was possible. We all hold so much more potential. I haven't typically talked about these things in my online presence up to this time, but we live in a world that is demanding deeper answers, that is demanding that we learn how to come together, how to create deeper solutions. And therefore, rather than keeping this as information I only teach in my school in New York City, it is now time for the conversation to deepen, in my opinion. So, where do we start? Let's talk about some of the basics of self. How well do you know yourself at this point? What I mean is, do you know the fact that we are all made up of 7 energy centers, 7 levels of consciousness, 7 levels of potential? Do you know what those levels are? Do you know how to work through those levels? Do you know how to claim more and more of yourself? Do you know how to trust that your life can get better and better and better, and that it's all up to you? You don't have to wait on something from outside yourself to happen in order to claim and grow into more of your fulfillment, more of your sacredness, more of your trust of self, more of your value of self. That is what we need to begin. An education about self that also teaches us how to energetically connect to self and create experiences, not just information. Experiences of all that is possible for you and for me. That is the journey I have been on, and the journey that I have been encouraging and helping others to inspire within themselves over the last 25 years. Thousands of people around the world, all the same, all missing, for the most part, this vital inner education about self. So let's just start with some of the foundations in our episode today. Let's start with the fact that we have 3 main facets of self: a physical self, a spiritual self, and then a heart center that joins together that lower and higher self. I just threw out a bunch of terms. Now I'm going to go into a little more detail about that. The first 3 energy centers of our bodies are from the base of the spine up to the solar plexus just below the rib cage. This lower self just means it's the lower in the body energy centers. It's not about better or worse being lower and higher. It is simply the lower foundational levels of self, the first 3 stories of a 7-story building called you, is made up of your physical, emotional, and mental connections. Most of the time, we don't even have a deep relationship with our lower selves. Let's imagine that we're in a school that only has 7 grades. We must go through the first 3 grades to become prepared to move into the higher and higher potentials. This physical personality self needs tons of nurturing. In my School of Self-Mastery, the first things we do are get to know self and how to create an intimacy with self so we can claim our most authentic self. Why are we not already our most authentic self? We haven't lived in a world that has learned how to celebrate individuality. We haven't lived in a world that has been educated about how to nurture self, how to honor and value self. If we'd had mommies and daddies who grew up with that kind of education and nurturing, then we would have probably received even more of it as well. But my journeys around the world with people at all kinds of levels of accomplishments, money, opportunity, still share the same reality that we have missed this inner education about nurturing and valuing self. Not necessarily just what we do or what we're accomplishing. We tend to want to be outer focused, and there's a reason for that. In our foundational years, when we were developing these lower 3 energy centers, if we did not get the 9 nurturing needs, the 9 nurturing experiences consistently encouraged and modeled that taught you that you're safe, that you matter, that you're a sacred individual on a soul journey. How many times did mommy, daddy, or the other authority figures in your life ever say those words? You are truly a sacred individual on a soul journey. You matter. That is the deeper truth. But if they didn't know how, then what we end up with are various accumulated experiences of fear, shame, and judgment. That is what we begin to hold down here in the lower self. And so, without nurturing that would teach us to go inside and claim selves and trust that inner value, we have instead remained frozen looking out to the caregivers of our lives, mommy, daddy to begin with. We're looking out to them saying, I need you to provide safety, connection, and nurturing. I need you to acknowledge that I matter and that I'm a sacred individual. We needed them to provide the 9 nurturing experiences that we all seek more than any other thing. And if they simply didn't know how because nobody had provided it for them, then we don't have to make anybody wrong and bad. But we still need the education about self in a huge way. So the bottom line is the fact that you are a soul with a physical set of physical levels of consciousness and experience and spiritual levels of consciousness and experience all joined together in the center, in the heart. The higher self, the lower self, joined together in the heart, which is the center of the adult empowered consciousness. How many of those things did you already know about yourself? Why do I ask you the question? I'm not doing it to challenge you. I'm doing it to encourage you that if you're not aware of self at those levels, then you can't claim and access more of the potential of self that will allow your life to get better and better and better. I know these things are possible, not only from my own life and my own journey of seeking, but I know them from having taught thousands of people around the world as well. And when people get a clear education about self and learning how to nurture and connect to self on the inside, then we begin to claim our 7 levels of consciousness in a very real, practical, meaningful way. Then we can marry this inner sense of self into the structures of our lives, into our relationships, into our jobs. The reason most people are not fulfilled in their jobs and don't think they make enough money, etc., is because the outer can never be enough to compensate for the missing inner connection to self. The reason we are here starts with claiming self and learning how to value the sacredness of self, the sacred spirituality of your soul journey, which equals a move into the center heart adult self, the empowered adult center that joins together the lower and the higher selves, the meeting place of our physical world, physical 3D, and our higher spiritual multidimensional selves. Over time, I'll talk about what each of those things means, but empowered at last is all about accessing the heart, accessing the center of our beings, which is not possible if we are trapped in the lower self, defended, protected, separate, based on the unresolved fear, shame, and judgment that we hold in the lower self. So what I have tended to focus on in my podcasts are clues and hints for resolving the wounded lower self, for facing your fear, shame, and judgment, for beginning to make more empowered adult choices, such as creating an empowered vision for your life that you're moving toward, that I did in a recent episode. Clues and hints for how you can resolve what keeps you from your higher sacred spiritual self, from trusting your connection to life, to the sacredness of life. Now let's come back one more time to a really practical level. We live on a world, on a planet that is filled with people doing the best they know how, but without a clear education of learning to connect to the inner self, without learning how to value and hold myself sacred. I don't live a life that is valuing me. And if I don't live a life that is valuing me, I can't live a life that is truly valuing you, much less bigger and bigger groups of people. We live in a world that is in crisis in many ways. What does that crisis come from? It has come from the choices to compensate in the outer world, trying to get the outer world to somehow fill up the wounded inner self, trying to give us a sense of safety, a sense of trust that we matter. We've done this and pushed the pendulum and pushed the pendulum, and we've gotten bigger and bigger houses and more opportunities, and we're not more fulfilled overall. We may be more distracted and have a whole lot more ways to keep ourselves numbed out to the fact that on the inside, we are a world in crisis which is here. Disconnection, wounding, defense, separation, not self-value and self-trust that I matter, and therefore recognize your individuality and that you matter and that you are sacred and that the planet matters and the planet is sacred. And once we start to connect to sacred spirituality, inner journey, then we can stop misusing the planet. We can get on with nurturing one another, working together to create solutions that serve the good of the whole. We live in governmental systems and economic systems and social systems that are so dang out of balance, mostly because they come from individual people trying to create fulfilling solutions only on the outside and not knowing how to value the good of the whole. Just right here in the United States, we have two primary political parties who rarely come together to say, let's look at how having more than one perspective enhances our capacity to create a solution. What we have done is we've come in with, I can't be wrong, you can't be right. We're in opposition to one another because nobody is trusting their own value in solutions. Nobody is trusting that we live in a world where solutions are more than ideals. We don't trust them, we don't believe in them, because we haven't built the foundation for them right here on the inside. The sacred spirituality of life is learning how to value, learning how to hold life sacred, which must start with self. I've hammered this, in many, many ways in today's episode. It's an introduction to a subject that we must begin to explore. I am thrilled to tell you that in the 25 years of doing this at my School of Self-Mastery, thousands of people have discovered how to deepen into whatever layers they've covered so far. People at different levels, people who've been with me longer, people who've explored various levels of this. But every single individual learning how to value themselves, hold themselves sacred, and how to make empowered moves out of the wounding of the lower self into the empowerment of the heart, which prepares us for even more. That is what this podcast is about. This is why I do what I do. And the episode could just as easily have been called The Sacredness of You rather than Sacred Spirituality. It is the same thing. So, in order to make the education about all of this more accessible and possible, what I have done is created various courses and workshops. In order to get education, we must go somewhere that educates. And in order to make this information more accessible to people all around the world, I have created courses such as a course called Claiming Your Authentic Self. If you have not learned how to develop intimacy with your inner self and you still hold all the wounding of fear, shame, and judgment, even from the early years of your lives, then you can't move into more and more of the authenticity of all that you are. That course will give you weekly videos that will allow you to move one piece at a time, adding foundational layers of understanding self, the physical self, the emotional self, the mental self, so that you prepare to heal the wounding, that you prepare to transcend separation, defense, feeling alone on the inside, no matter what you're creating on the outside. All of these things are possible. I know I get passionate and I could go on and on and on, as I already have. And so, I thank you for being here. I look forward to continuing the conversation. I want to spend certain episodes giving clues and hints about spirituality, sexuality, and the power of the heart, the empowered place of adult consciousness where we truly tap our capacity to love. All of these things will become hinted at and encouraged, but there is no replacement for having a consistent process that builds your awareness one layer at a time. So I truly hope that you will consider going to the website ronbaker.net and that you will explore ways that you can deepen your sacred connection and intimacy with yourself. Have a great week. I will see you again soon, and I thank you for letting me deepen this conversation with you today. I look forward to more. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Before we close, I wanted to encourage a couple of things. Number one is to go to ronbaker.net. There you will find lots of clues for how you can deepen this conversation. You can also find a way to get the booklet, An Essential Guide to the 9 Nurturing Needs. This is going to be a core focus of how we're going to enhance the quality of your life from the inside out in all the episodes. So I encourage you to go there to get an overview of those 9 nurturing experiences that we all seek more than any other thing in our lives. I also want you to get involved in the conversation here. I really would like to talk about the things that are important to you, the things that you're concerned about or excited about. We live in a wacky world that is changing constantly. We need to learn to connect to ourselves, to count on ourselves, and to count on one another. So please either get involved at ronbaker.net or in the Facebook page, which is Empowered at Last with Ron Baker. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to deepening this conversation about life. And I close as always, choose well, live fully, and by all means, be good to you. Have a great week.